Hey everyone, welcome back. We're on Unit 3, and I'm assuming, of course, that you've completed the challenges from the previous unit. If you haven't, you've got to stop the video and get those done, okay? Now, question. What is a core emotion? It's best to conceptualize core emotions as biologically hardwired sensations, impulses, and signals. Sensations, impulses, and signals. And I want to really encourage you to consider that emotions aren't bad or good, they just are. True emotions aren't bad or good, they just are. They're biologically hardwired. They actually signal to us something about our environment, okay? And they're to be paid attention to. We can't just set them aside. We need to do something with them. They aren't always in our conscious control, okay? So if I said to you, I want you to experience deep joy in the next 5 seconds, go. You're trying to consciously make yourself joyful. It doesn't really work like that, okay? The thing that I'm really after right now, okay, is that you guys start to understand emotions aren't necessarily something that we can think our way through. Emotions are something that we must experience viscerally. They have to be felt. The impulses and the sensations and the signals have to be experienced viscerally, gutturally, in order to be discharged and processed. Some things you can think through and problem solve, and then some core emotions need to be discharged from the body. A way to think about this is, the next time you go to your chiropractor, I want you to ask this question. You know, you go to see a chiropractor because you're out of alignment, and then they adjust you, poof, everything gets put back in order, and you get a release, okay? And I've often asked chiropractors this question. Do you ever have a client that comes in, you give them a quick adjustment, and then they start laughing uncontrollably or crying for no apparent reason? They're just like, yeah, that happens. That does happen to some of my clients. Well, the reason is that body's holding on to some unprocessed emotion, and when the body gets aligned, there's a discharge. It's outside of conscious control, but the body is holding on to it. So it's very important that we actually do something with our core emotions. So have a look at the board here. These are what we're going to call our core emotions: anger, sadness, fear, joy, disgust, excitement. Now, something to note here. Emotions, again, aren't good or bad, they just are, but they can be extremely overwhelming. So think of the last time you were around somebody who was really angry. You felt really uncomfortable. Perhaps you felt really unsafe and you wanted to get out of there. Think of the last time you were at a funeral or around someone who was wailing in deep grief, in deep sadness. It's uncomfortable to sit with people when they're weeping and they're in deep grief. Or think of the last time you were in a state of fear, just tremendous, terrified, gripping fear. No one wants to feel that way. It's really overwhelming. So we will do what it takes to not feel those things. Okay, and we did talk about avoidance in Unit 1. So that's often what we see is we want to avoid these things because they can be overwhelming. The problem is when we don't experience our core emotions and they don't get discharged and processed, they actually stay in the body. Okay, and that can cause problems. Notice, these core emotions can be uncomfortable for you, but they're also uncomfortable for other people. Okay, so I want you to consider the following scenario. I'm with my wife, I'm watching a movie, and a sad scene comes up. Now, my wife loves me, I know she loves me, she's been with me through thick and thin, but this sad scene's coming, and I'm starting to feel sad, and some tears are starting to formulate in my tear ducts, and my heart's beating, and what do? I grab for my phone, I hold my breath, and I start to distract myself so that I don't cry in front of my wife. Now, what's that about? Well, there's this sense of shame and embarrassment that might come, or guilt, humiliation. Now, I know my wife's not going to reject me, okay? Part of me knows that, but part of me is so trained to hide some of that sadness that I'll shove it down. And the way I'm shoving it down is holding my breath and staring at my phone and getting my mind off of the sad scene and getting my body off of the sad sensation. Here's another example of how we kind of distract or shut down or avoid these strong emotions. Suppose you've got a small child that runs, a small boy of the age of 8, he runs into the house and he's angry and he's stomping his feet and he's throwing things and he's yelling and he's just mad. We don't know what he's mad about. The dad doesn't know what he's mad about, but the dad says, "You're being inappropriate. Sit down. Shut up and sit down." And what does the little boy learn? Well, I guess it's not okay to be angry. Right? Now, obviously it's not okay to go punch people and kick holes in the walls, but we have to be careful when we're dealing with children not to train them to shut down their emotions. Emotions have a purpose. Little Johnny just got slapped in the face by his neighbor who just also stole his toy. So he has a reason. There's a valid reason for being angry, and we need to help him regulate that anger. Okay? The anger there was, let's say, appropriate. It's the way we discharge the anger that can become the issue. Another example, I recently, over the last few years, had a client who was dealing with some tremendous anxiety. And after a session or two, we got to the root of it, and he was able to confess that he had an affair on his wife. He was dealing with tremendous disgust. But rather than deal with the disgust, he just decided to use a lot of meth and alcohol to try to drown out that disgusting sensation, okay? And so he was in treatment to deal with root issues. And remember, the signal, the core emotion, was giving him direction. It was telling him, hey, we need to deal with this. We need to confess this, own this, and confess this not just to the therapist, but to the wife, and deal with the consequences. And as he began to do that, the disgust began to dissolve. Now, I'm making that sound very easy. It's not. I'm just giving you an example. What happens, here's a question. These red balls here represent what happens when we aren't able to discharge our emotions and they're just shoved in. It's comparable to being constipated. So I drew this man here with some balls here to demonstrate a constipated person, a compacted person. Now, if you've ever been constipated, it's highly uncomfortable. And if you don't get the right medication, the right medical intervention, the body's going to go toxic. You can actually die in the long run. But before that, there's extreme discomfort. We have to discharge the compacted material. Emotions must be released and discharged. In fact, this is what we see in trauma. What happens is the body, the nervous system, goes through a high arousal event, a traumatic event, and those memories and those sensations get stuck and frozen in the body. People with trauma need to experience a visceral discharge of those sensations and a reorienting of those memories and emotions, okay? Sigmund Freud said it this way. He said, what the mind has forgotten, the body has not, thankfully. What the mind has forgotten, the body has not. Many of our emotional impulses and signals are subconscious. So we're not even aware that they're affecting us. So here's another example. I want you to hear me on this. So this is actually some of you. I had a client. I've actually had many clients like this that come in and they report past sexual abuse, okay? And now they're in their mid-20s, mid-30s, and they're married, and they're wanting to be sexually intimate with their spouse. And they find that when their spouse touches their hand or begins to rub their back or engages sex, their body starts to do weird things. They start to tremble and shake. When the wife smells the husband's cologne, she feels unsafe and she feels disgusted. Now she loves this man. She loves her husband, but yet she's having these weird visceral responses, like she's afraid of her husband and she's disgusted with her husband and she's irritated. And it has nothing to do with her husband. Her body has linked the smell of cologne and the touch of a man with the trauma that she experienced years ago. Now, this is outside of her conscious mind. All she knows is, in my body, I feel unsafe, I feel disgusted, afraid, and angry, and sad, and all of it. And I just want to get out of here. Now, you can see how that can be a problem for people, right? What these clients need is a visceral discharge of those frozen, constipated emotions. I know that's a weird way of looking at it, but it'll help a lot of you guys to consider that. Now, in the case of trauma, in the case of the wife, the body is saying, I remember what happened back then. I'm not letting it happen again. And so the past is impeding the present. Okay? Why am I talking about trauma? Because oftentimes anxiety isn't actually anxiety. Its root is trauma from the past, and it's manifesting as anxiety, which is closely tied to fear. Now, going backwards, remember, these can be really overwhelming, and they're not bad or good, they just are, and they're meant to inform us to take action. They're signals. And sometimes there's false alarms in the case of anxiety, but quite often the signals are saying something, okay? In the case of sadness, again, if I have a fight with my spouse or a fight with my friend, I'm feeling sad about that. The sadness is instructing me. It's saying, hey, why don't you assertively speak with her? And why don't you deal with the topic, with the issue, and confront the issue and try to bring reconciliation? There's a solution here. The sadness is driving me to confess the thing that I did or whatever, right? So that we can go a million directions with that, but again, it's a signal giving me direction. Now, I want you to recognize that because these are uncomfortable, we often do things to avoid them, and we call those defense mechanisms. And defense mechanisms, these are some of, I've listed a few. The list can be a lot longer than that. These are just a few highlighted defense mechanisms that I see quite frequently in therapy. And defense mechanisms are simply ways that we go about avoiding or moving away from discomfort. It's a way that we go about escaping that overwhelming emotion. Okay, so if I'm dealing with some anxiety and fear, maybe I'll just stay really busy with work or really busy with house chores. As long as I'm busy, that stuff can't float to the surface. Notice the arrow. I put that there so you would see the core emotions do want to come up, but a lot of times we shove them down. And this is a way that we shove them down. We stay busy, busy, busy. People actually can't stay still because then the stuff pops up. Another one, humor. Think of a time when you were at a dinner and somebody brought up a political issue or something controversial, and people are starting to feel anxious. People are starting to feel a little bit disgusted with what the person was saying. Rather than really truly experience that, someone cracks a joke and lightens the atmosphere. Okay, alcohol. Rather than feel sad and terrified and disgusted, maybe I'll just drink a lot of alcohol and shoot a lot of meth. Name your drug. Distraction, technology. Rather than deal with the worries of life and the sadness that's underneath the hood, I'll just keep busy on social media and on YouTube and on the nightly news, and I'll stay busy, distracted with technology. Change of subject. That's a really common one. You can kind of interlock change of subject with spotlighting. So pretend that you're my roommate and you've been eating all my Cheerios, right? And I come in and I've had enough. You've just eaten through 2 boxes of my Cheerios and I've had enough. I'm up to here with it. And so I confront you. I say, hey, listen, you got to stop eating my Cheerios. And in fact, you've been like late on rent the past few months. And I start to kind of bash you and just confront you. Well, and that's true. Let's say you've been eating my Cheerios and you've been late on rent. So what I'm saying is factually true. But rather than own that and rather than take responsibility for that, you begin to highlight my defects. So, well, Johnny, you keep leaving the toilet seat up and you keep leaving dirty laundry throughout the house and in the hall, and you actually forgot to pay the light bill, and you bring up all the stuff that I'm not doing. So the spotlight was on you, but now it's on me, and it gets the pressure off of you, okay? Because when I was confronting you, you were starting to feel irritable and angry, and you were starting to feel kind of disgusted because what I was saying was true, like you're not being a responsible person. And perhaps that disgusted you because you're like, I want to be a responsible person. Maybe I was coming at you in a hostile manner, so you were feeling backed into a corner and afraid. Rather than feel that way, let me just get the spotlight off of me and put it on you. All right, so you see, change of subject and spotlighting can be a way that we avoid the discomfort of true core emotions. So in review, true core emotions must be experienced in order to be discharged. They have to run their course, guys. They have to run their course, which means we need to be able to sit in the pocket. Listen, if we can't sit with our own selves, we're going to be strangely disconnected and unable to really connect with other people and their emotions because we're disjointed. If we're not connected with ourselves, how are we going to connect with other people? You know, I've heard people say, you hear people say this all the time. I feel like I just don't know Bob. I feel like I just can't get access to their heart. I feel like I just can't get in past that wall. Well, that person's shut off to the world. That's a true statement for a lot of people. So the solution is we have to sit with ourselves. We have to, as if you were sitting with a child. So follow this example. This is my daughter Logan. I'll pick on her for a minute. This happened probably 3 to 6 months ago. She runs downstairs and I'm on the couch and she's a hot mess. She's crying. She's hyper emotional. She's obviously angry and sad, maybe scared a little bit. She's sad and angry because her unicorn's missing. Okay, so for her, this is her world. She's big on toys. Her unicorn is missing, and her anger and her sadness, her irritability and sadness and anxiety, right, is pretty overwhelming for me as a dad. She's crying and she's loud, and my initial response is I want to shut that down. Hey, calm down. Calm down and shush. Calm down. Sit down. Be quiet. That's my initial reaction because it's annoying. It's like overwhelming for me. Her overwhelming emotions are overwhelming for me. But because I've been around the block with this, with myself and with clients, I understand it's not my job to shut people's emotions down, right? So I took her on my lap. I put her on my lap and said, Logan, okay. And I got my hand on her back and kind of rubbing her back. Say, Logan, what's going on? What, your unicorn's missing? Yeah, unicorn's missing. Okay, do you think it's in your room? I don't know, I think my sister took it. Oh, you think your sister took it? Okay, did you see her take it? No, I didn't see it. And I'm just kind of talking it out with her a little bit. It's a unicorn. For me, it's no big deal. For her, it's the entire world. Okay? And after about 2 minutes of acknowledgement and validation, she wipes her eyes and she runs off and she's almost forgotten about the unicorn. She got the emotions to discharge, right? She kind of settled herself. There's a visceral explosion of the emotions, and then she's able to stabilize. She didn't need me to explain to her why unicorns aren't important, and she didn't need me to shut her down, and she didn't need me to rationalize with her. She just needed me to acknowledge her and validate her, right? And connect. That was a connect moment. And there was some touch there. I had my hand on her back. She's on my lap. Acknowledgement and validation. And a lot of us, that sounds really weird to hear that, especially coming from a male. But understand this, even our own personal core emotions, when we give language to our emotions, when we sit and experience our core emotions, it actually calms the brain and the nervous system. We get in touch with the direction that the core emotion is leading us in. And we return to a state of balance, or in biological terms, homeostasis, where we're back to a place of peace and curiosity and connection and courage. But we don't get there if we avoid and escape into defense mechanisms. We actually have to sit in the pocket. So in this challenge, I'm going to ask you to practice sitting in the pocket, and I'm going to walk you through how to do that.